Hello everyone, so today's lesson is converting fractions to percentages. So here on task 1 we have 100 counters. The question is, what fraction of the array of counters is red? So how many red counters have we got there? We have got 10, 20, 30. So we've got 30 out of how many altogether? So there are 100 counters there, so we've got 30 out of 100. So 30 out of 100, the fraction is 30 hundredths. If I want to simplify that, then I can divide the numerator by 10, divide the denominator by 10, so then the simplified fraction is 3/10. So both answers are correct. So question 1A, what fraction of the array of counters is red? It's 30 hundredths or 3/10. B, what fraction of the array of counters is yellow? So again, how many yellow counters are there? There are 70 yellow counters out of how many? Well, there's 100 altogether. So it's 70 out of 100. So the fraction that are yellow is 70 hundredths. Again, let's simplify it by dividing the numerator and the denominator by the same amount. So 7/10 is the equivalent, 70 hundredths is the equivalent to 7/10. B, what percentage is red? So back here, the fraction is 30 hundredths. So the percentage is 30% because it's 30% out of 100. What fraction is yellow? Well, we've got 70 hundredths that are yellow, so the percentage is 70%, 70 out of 100. Question 2. Shade half of the 100 squares. So I'm sure that you know what half is. What is the equivalent fraction in hundredths? Well, half is the equivalent of 50 hundredths. So you have to colour in 50 out of 100. And here, 7/10, what is the equivalent in hundredths? So what do I do to 10 to convert it into hundredths? I multiply it by 10, which means I have to multiply the numerator by 10. So 7 times 10 is 70. So 7/10 is the equivalent of 70 hundredths. So for this one here, you need to colour in 70 out of 100. For the last part of the task, you have to write the fractions as percentages. So the first one, 40 hundredths equals, well, 40 out of 100 is 40%. 65 out of 100, or 65 hundredths, is 65%. A half is 50%. 50% is half of 100. So 50 out of 100. So half is the equivalent to 50%, which is the equivalent to 50 hundredths. And then 7/10 is the equivalent, what's the equivalent fraction in hundredths? Well, just like we've just done, we times the denominator times the numerator by 10, so we have 70 hundredths. So that is task 1. Task 2. Open in Word, so the boxes are all lined up correctly. Okay. So, just like we've been doing, so 9/10. 9/10, the equivalent fraction in hundredths. Well, what do you do to 10? To make it 100, you times it by 10. So because I've multiplied the denominator by 10, I have to multiply the numerator by 10. So 9 times 10 is 90. So 9 tenths is the equivalent of 90 hundredths. So the percentage is 90% because it's 90 out of 100. B, 9 twentieths. Again, find the equivalent fraction. So what do I do to 20? To make it into 100, I multiply it by 5, which means I have to multiply 9 by 5. So 9 times 5 is 45. So 45 hundredths is 45%. What do you notice here? We have 9 tenths here, but 9 twentieths here. What do you notice about those fractions? What do you notice about the percentages? C is 9 fiftieths. So what's the equivalent fraction in hundredths? So what do I do to 50? To make it 100, you multiply it by 2, which means you have to multiply the numerator by 2. 9 times 2 is 18. So 9 fiftieths is the equivalent fraction of 18 hundredths. So now you've found the equivalent fraction in hundredths, you can now find out what the percentage is, 18 hundredths. The next one, 9 25ths. What do you think that answer is going to be? If this is 9 fiftieths and this is 9 25ths, what do you think the percentage will be? Find the equivalent fraction in hundredths and then find out the percentage. Have a look to see what you notice. Question 2. So we've got 1/4. What is the equivalent fraction of a quarter in hundredths? So what do you do to 4 to make it into 100? How many 4s in 100? So then find out what you multiply it by there and then do the same here. So tell me what the equivalent fraction is in hundredths, then tell me what the percentage is. But think about this. What is a quarter of 100? Well, half is 50. Half again is 25. So a quarter is going to be 25 hundredths. So then you know what the percentage is, 25%. So hopefully you know what half is. What is half in hundredths? And then tell me what the percentage is. 3/4. If you know what 1/4 is, here's 1/4. What is 3/4? B, what is 1/5? So what is 1/5? What's the equivalent fraction in hundredths? How many 5s go into 100? What do you multiply 5 by to get to 100? So whatever you multiply the denominator by, you multiply the numerator with the same number. Find out what the equivalent fraction is in hundredths, then tell me what the percentage is. Once you know what 1/5 is, then you know what 2/5 are, and then you can use that to help you find out what 4/5 are. And then again, 16, do the same with section C. So C, 16 20ths. What's the equivalent fraction in hundredths? So remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So how many 20s are there in 100? So tell me what you multiply the denominator by, tell me what you multiply the numerator by, the same. Once you find out the equivalent fraction in hundredths, you can then tell me what the percentage is. And again, 45 50ths. What is the equivalent fraction in hundredths? So what do you do to 50 to make it into 100? Tell me there. Multiply the numerator by the same number. Tell me what the equivalent fraction is in hundredths, and then you'll be able to tell me the percentage. And then last question, question 3. This person here, Ron, he thinks that 1/10 is 10%, so 1/20 must be 20%. Explain the mistake that Ron has made and then tell me what the right answer is. So 1/10 equals 10%. He is right, because 1/10 is the equivalent to 10 hundredths, which is 10%. So what is 1/20? What do you think it is? If 1/10 is 10 hundredths, which is 10%, what is 1/20? So what's the equivalent fraction in hundredths? And then tell me what the percentage is. What do you do to 20? How many times do you multiply 20 by to get to 100? So whatever you do to the numerator, whatever you do to the denominator, you have to make sure you do the same number to the numerator. Tell me the equivalent fraction out of 100 or hundredths, and then tell me the percentage. Well done, everybody.